Hey, wholeness and welcome. This is Josh of Integrating Presence, and I'll soon be joined by co-host Ani, formerly known as Ahsoka, for this swapcast with her Echoes and Stories of Dhamma podcast. And we'll be joined by guest Bhante Bhikkhu Subhuti. We didn't do a formal introduction in this. You'll soon learn all you need to know that an introduction would cover. So without further ado, here it is.
Hello, good evening, Bhante.
Good evening.
How are you today?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, we just had a lot of some chanting, and it's something I do every day, nearly every day. Just had a Samanera who we had a special day for him because he's flying out to Myanmar to go to the Pa'ak Study Center in Sihanoukville. So he's only 12 years old. So we had like a big chant, a lot of coconut lamps, coconut oil lamps. Yeah, we had maybe 20 of them or something. So it's good.
So,
So I wish him
Bhante,
well.
you have had an interesting journey coming from being a computer programmer into becoming a renunciant and homeless.
Yeah.
Start living with uncertainty and completely different culture as well. You've written a book, Going Broke, which is available on your website.
Going for broke.
And there's a lot of reflection on your journey from, starting to take this shift, turn around in your life. Would you tell us a bit would you tell us a bit about how you settled in Sri Lanka eventually? Give you as much time as you need.
Okay.
It's like having your own.
I'll try to
Instead of
give
you
the shorter
just
version. Yeah.
yeah.
So for me, I got into spirituality probably when I was like 17 or 18. I think about 17. I asked my mother to buy me a book called Be Here Now, Remember, Be Here Now by Ram Dass. And surprisingly, it's a lot of people's first spiritual books, at least in my generation. But I really, it was just a little bit of curiosity of what what spirituality is, and what is those, because I was just 17. Especially in the 80s, there wasn't really any you were really weird if you were into spirituality. And like the Buddhist section in the early 90s in Barnes and Noble, we used to have bookstores, if you remember, and the whole Eastern philosophy section was maybe like 3 feet wide. It was like one shelf and one or two shelves on a bookshelf, and that would include like Hindu and Mahayana Tibetan, and there would be nothing in Theravada. There'd just be maybe the Majjhima Nikaya or the Digha Nikaya, and just a few other books, maybe like 2 or 3 other books. What the Buddha taught might have been there in the Dhammapada. So anyways, when I was in college, I took a world religion lecture hall thing by chance, because it was my first year and I was just signing up for any classes that I could get into. And when I learned about Buddhism, I thought that Buddhism would be a good religion for me, mostly because I didn't party when I was in university. I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs, and so the rule, there's only 5 precepts, and so the rules seemed very simple for me. And so then I asked a friend to teach me meditation, who used to go to UC Berkeley, which was one of the places you could find spirituality in the early 90s, late 80s and early 90s. And he came back to a local school that I was going to, and I knew his brother. He is like an older brother of a friend of mine, And I asked him to teach me meditation, and he taught me meditation, how to count my breath, and the basic, count it. For him, he says count up to 10 and back to 0. In the Pa'ak method, they say count, or even the Visuddhimagga, actually, they say count 5 is too small and 10 is too large. So usually we pick 8 because it's close to the Eightfold Noble Path. So, but he taught me how to count the breath, and I was thinking, like, should I light a candle? And he's like, if you want to light a candle, you can light a candle. I said, should I light some incense? And he says, if you want to light some incense, you can light some incense. And so I did that, and it was something that I kept up for a good remainder of my life, actually. So, and I learned how to meditate and kept meditating, and then I saw some advertisements for meditation on the bulletin board. I ended up joining what ended up being like some type of computer cult, and teaching meditation, no drugs, no alcohol, but you sort of get high off of meditation. And everyone was like you go to these parties where you just meditate and have fun, and they were really like high vibe parties. They're really cool. But you mingle around, and there's like college students, and there's like other people like who are a little older, in their 30s or 40s, and like everyone's a computer programmer who's a professional. And then later they want you to become computer programmer as well. And so I was into it, and I decided to try it out. It wasn't my major in university. I was supposed to be a school teacher. And back then we had, it's not like computers nowadays. Not many people had computers. And at that time, I didn't have a computer, actually. Very few people owned computers. We might have a computer lab. You had to take a test in order to go into the computer lab. During that time, you had to prove that you could copy files by typing the commands back then. And people were afraid of computers, and being a computer programmer is like, you had to be really brave, because the computers were not as friendly as they are now. And I ended up graduating with a degree in technology education. It sounds good for someone who's going to become a computer programmer, but it has nothing to do with computer programming. And there's another major called educational technology, which is about bringing in technology into the classroom. And that's a different major. It's the reverse words. So after I graduated, I joined that thing, and then I became a computer professional with a different degree. I ended up fast tracking into the computer industry, and they wanted us to make a lot of money, and they told us how to do it. And we went direct. My first job was contracting, consulting, and straight in. I never had like a full-time corporate job. And we learned how to do that and know our stuff cold, and get into the business. And so I decided to leave that group, because it was getting more businessy instead of spiritual. It used to be very spiritual. We used to meditate with the teacher. It was like really fun, incredible experiences, actually. And then so I decided to leave after I became a professional for like a year or so, maybe like a year or so. And then I just went to different jobs. And my third job was working for Bayer Diagnostics, the aspirin company, the medical, pharmaceutical, they're a chemical company, actually. And we were making a blood meter. And I was brought in because the project was late, the human blood project. It counts your red blood cells, your white blood cells, and this other thing called New XY. I don't even know what those are. But we made this machine, and then the second phase was an animal blood machine. And the animal blood machine, I found out later, was used for animal laboratory testing. So I was a vegetarian at that time, and there was one other vegetarian. This type of stuff, you were like a weirdo back then if you were like a vegetarian. They didn't have vegetarian menus at restaurants. I was there to watch Starbucks do soy milk lattes, like when they first started doing them. It was like a secret thing that you had to know about. But so yeah, I was a vegetarian. There was one other vegetarian in the whole complex, and she told me about this animal laboratory testing thing, and I decided that I couldn't work on the project and that I would leave. And I gave 6 months notice, and I continued to work on the human blood machine. And generally speaking, the code is nearly the same for the animal blood machine, except a little bit of a user interface to select which animal's blood you're testing. But generally speaking, especially from my end, the sections of the code that I was particularly working on, it was all the same. And so they told me to work on the human machine because I refused to work on the animal, the phase 2 project. And so they told me to just continue working on the human blood machine, and they would copy my code into the phase 2 code base. And eventually I had to leave. They were paying me lots of money, and I wasn't doing much work because most of the development was on phase 2. And so they wanted me around because it was medical diagnostic equipment, and I could fix my own bugs like in an hour, and it might take someone 2 weeks to do it. So whatever they paid me per week, per hour, whatever, it was a bargain. But eventually I decided to leave, and I gave them 6 months notice. And that was a catalyst for me to go traveling. It was something that I always wanted to do. I thought that because I was a contractor or consultant, that I would have long breaks in between jobs because it would be difficult to get a job, but it wasn't that way. And I just went from one job to the next, and my jobs were very long-term, actually, even though it was based on short-term hire. Originally, it was short-term hires, but they ended up lasting a long time. So I never took a vacation. I barely took any days off. And then I just went all or nothing, and I got a backpack and a ticket to go halfway around the world, and I was ready for a big journey, which I wrote about. And I should backtrack a couple of steps. I did Goenka. When I left that teacher, I started in the Tibetan world because it was like closest to like what the teacher was doing. And then I went to the Mahayana world, Chinese Buddhism, Vietnamese Buddhism. And I was doing the teacher training course in a Vietnamese temple. And from there, I learned about the White Lotus Sutra, and I learned that it's okay to lie if you have a good reason. And I was like, this is nonsense. And I completely rejected Mahayana because of that. And at the same time, it was we were assigned a book to summarize and teach. And I had picked The Wings of Awakening by Ajahn Thanissaro. These are the 37 factors of enlightenment, called the Bodhipakya Dhamma. And it was a good book. And at that time, we also had to do a retreat, a 7 to 10 day retreat per year as part of this course type thing that I was doing, this teacher training course. And so immediately I became like immersed in Theravada, and I rejected Mahayana Tibetan. And I was just so amazed with the structure of the Theravada suttas. And being someone who learned about education, we have a saying in the business: say what you're going to say it, say what you said. And if you look at the suttas, the Buddha, he will say, here are the 5 things of blah, blah, blah. And then he lists them out, and he said, these are the 5 things, and this is where it leads to, and then you reach Nibbana, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So it really grabbed me about how straightforward the teachings were, though. There was like no mysterious, there was nothing mystical, and it was very straightforward. It was very common sense. And I was like, wow, this is what I should be doing. And when I did my first Goenka retreat, and a lot of Westerners, now you can have many entrances into Buddhism and spirituality, but one of the main entrance ways back in the 90s, early 90s, actually this was in the late 90s, was to do a Goenka course. It's one of the only things around. Otherwise, you'd have to spend $200-300 a night doing a Tibetan or doing the IMS classes. Actually, they were about $80 or $100 a night at that time. And so, so I did the Goenka thing, and I really, really, really loved it. I just had so much faith in it, because on the first night, I ate a lot of extra food on the first night. And then there's like a video recording, and he's like, "So you ate a lot of food, didn't you?" And, and I was like, how does he read my mind? And then I was like, no, this is a recording. So it's like, he knows human nature. And so then I followed the teachings, and I believed that you could do everything in the teachings that what he was teaching. And so I had a really great experience there. And I remember on the 10th day, they allow you to talk, and they do loving kindness. Everyone's talking, and I just want to stay in this. They give you this like pagoda room or something like that. And it was just like, when I got there, I was like, this is all I need. I just need a little meditation closet, and I'll be okay. And I remember crying on the last day, because everyone's talking, and I didn't want it to end, and I wanted this to be my life. And so step forward, go ahead a few years, not so many, a few more years. Then I quit my job, bought a plane ticket, going halfway around the world, and I thought maybe I could become a monk. We'll see what happens. And so anyways, I decided to go to monasteries and look at monasteries where I would maybe stay for 6-7 years. Just like someone in America looks at a college, a university, and says, do I want to stay here for 4 years? So my brother and sister did extensive, looking at universities to go and stay and doing the tour. And I was dragged along as the youngest sibling. And so I looked at monasteries in the same way. And I went to Bhavana Society, I went to Abhayagiri, I went to Wat Metta in America. And then I went off to Hawaii, and I got lost in Hawaii, and I was supposed to find retreat centers to volunteer at. They don't let people volunteer there, not like the Goenka courses. So I got lost. I was like living on the beach, and I had a good time there. But it was like one of the times when I wasn't meditating, and I was losing my Buddhist path while I was in Hawaii, in Kauai specifically, which is a place I actually went back to as a monk. And I stayed there for 5 months. And then I went to Fiji, and this is where some magic happened. And I think you know the story, but I was in the ocean in Fiji. We were playing a game called Shark Attack. I don't recommend doing that, but we were pretending we're in a Jaws movie, okay? And who could pretend that they were getting eaten by a shark the best? And I never do that. Never enact something like that. It's like so bad to do. But I was young, and there were 2 other German travelers with me. We were in the ocean just doing nothing, because that's what you do in Fiji. And a couple hours later, I looked at my watch to find out. I looked at my watch to find out when tea time was, and there was no watch, and I lost my watch. And one of the girls said that she thought that seaweed fell off my hand, but it was actually my watch with a Velcro. Oh, sorry about this. And so I got a mask from the office, from the backpacker place I was staying at, and I started looking for it, but it was nowhere to be found. And then later at night, it was low tide, and I started looking for it, and I couldn't find it at all. And then that night, I started to think about that watch in particular, which was a countdown timer for my meditations. It was my alarm clock for waking up early. And that was like sort of like my Buddhist device that I used to stay in check. But starting when I went to Hawaii, and especially in Fiji, I stopped really using it for that. And so I started to think later that night, when it was time to sleep, like, what's happening to me? What happened? I was supposed to, like, we call it sit and serve. I was supposed to like volunteer meditation centers, and I became just like other backpackers. And obviously I was a little different from the other backpackers, but nevertheless, I was a traveler, and I was living on the beach. I was living in a tent. And so I was thinking about it that night. And then in the morning, I woke up early, which was while the sun was rising. For Fiji, that's waking up early. And I noticed that the tide was low again, the water was low again, and I thought, maybe I can find my watch. And I started to think about all the times I wanted to become a monk, but I just couldn't get myself to really fully commit, because for me, I wanted to really just do it just once. The idea of a temporary monk just really didn't seem, I heard about that, but it just wasn't something for me. And I wanted to really commit. And it was like getting married for me. And so anyways, I'm looking at the water, I see that it's low, and I'm thinking about, well, maybe I can find my watch. And I said to myself very quickly, because the mind is very quick, while I'm walking out, I'm thinking about all the times I wanted to become a monk, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And I said to myself, if I find my watch, I'm thinking about how impossible it is to find a watch that's been in the ocean for almost a whole day and the whole night. And I'm thinking about how difficult it would be to find it. And I was like, if I find my watch, I'll definitely become a monk. No more games, no more fooling around. And this is like a split second, that while I'm walking out to the beach, and all of a sudden I see something in the distance. It's like flapping in the waves, and it looks like seaweed, but it looks different than everything else. So I go a little closer, and there I can see my watch strap. The watch is the watch is actually half buried in the sand. It's half buried in the sand, and as the waves are going through it, it's in the morning. The waves are calm, and I'm in like 1.5 feet of water or something like that, and the waves going over it, and it's covering it with a layer of sand. And when the wave pulls back, you could see the face of the watch, and the strap is floating. It was a Velcro strap. I still have it, actually. So I'm just looking at it. I'm like, I pick it up, and I'm just like looking at it, and I'm just like, what did I promise? What was the thing I was thinking about? And so I just it was a really cool moment. I was like on the beach, and I can just relive that moment when I tell the story. And I just remember just looking at my watch, and just like, wow, like he got me. And yeah. And so I knew I'd become a monk at that time, but I didn't know exactly when I would do that. And so I got comfortable in Fiji. I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. I'll just stay here for a while. It was like $15 a day, I think, to survive, with food and lodging and everything at these backpacker places, and basically could live there forever. Maybe it was $30 a day. I can't remember, but I think it was $30 New Zealand. They had the same currency as New Zealand, and that was like 2 to 1 at that time. But anyways, I was really comfortable there, and then all of a sudden I was staying at a New Zealand-owned backpacker place, and at that time there was a coup, and they wanted to not let foreigners own businesses in Fiji, and the main island was on fire, the main island, but I was on a small island, and we had a meeting, and they said, just stay where you are. It was like living on the East Coast, and during the LA riots in the 90s. It didn't really matter. It was very far away. But lo and behold, someone decided to burn the place, with the whole revolution or whatever. And so then I got evacuated to New Zealand, and a little push out of my comfort zone. And then after New Zealand, I pushed my trip through. I had like an itinerary, and I wanted to just push through. I had an open ticket, and I could adjust it. And I went to Australia after that. and then I went to India. And then in India, I was at Sai Baba's ashram then. And I remember also doing like a challenge, like if someone steals my slippers, I'll cut the trip short, and I'll definitely, I'll just head to Thailand to ordain. And no one was taking my slippers. The first day someone took my slippers, and so then I was thinking, like, if someone takes my slippers, I'll cut the trip short. But I remember at that time that I was hoping that someone would take my slippers. The slippers are flip-flops and sandals. In India, they call that the slippers. In Asia, Asia and Hawaii, they call them slippers. I wanted someone to take my slippers at that time. And then I knew in my heart that I wanted to become a monk. It wasn't like I was forced to because I found my watch. And so no one took my slippers, and I was okay with it. And but I just knew in my heart that I wanted to become a monk at that time. And so I cut my trip short in India. I was like living on the plane and just I'm living on the train. Sorry. I was living on the train, like getting off the train, looking at some things, taking pictures, and then hopping back on the train and sleeping on the train and going to the next place because I really wanted to move things along. Went to Nepal, and then I went to Nanachat, and I wanted to do this. I wanted to start the monk process while I was still 29 because the Buddha was 29 when he left. And I walked into Wat Pah Nanachat the day before my birthday in 2000, October 5th, 2000. And so I went to Wat Pah Nanachat, and it wasn't the best, it wasn't the perfect place, but it was the best place that I could find. But I really didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I remember someone saying to me, like, usually if you have business experience, you don't really do well in here. And it was true. I wasn't really happy, but I was going to ordain, and I like signed my life away and sent a DHL package to get rid of all the to do all the legal stuff. And I went on, the abbot put me on this Kruba Ajahn tour, which is like to see all these enlightened teachers. And I became less inspired. I was supposed to get inspired by it, but I became less inspired by it. And I had a book, Knowing and Seeing, which is Paul Oxido's like main book. It's like cliff notes to the Visuddhimagga, actually, on how to do it. And I had that book signed out of the library. Someone had just brought it from Burma, from Myanmar, a little bit before that. And the abbot, before he signed me up on that tour, he asked me what's wrong. And I said, well, it's not the perfect place, but it's the best place I can find. He says, what's your perfect place? I said, well, I have a kuti on the mountain, and I go down the mountain to get my food, and I meditate all day and meditate all night, and then I go to sleep, and then I wake up, meditate, and then I go down the mountain to have my food, and then I come back up and do this every day. And when I have a meditation experience, I go to the master and I say, Master, I've experienced something. And he says, develop it or reject it. And then I go back to my kuti and I just do that. He says, well, there is one place. This is Ajahn Jayasaro, actually. And he says, there is one place. And he told me about Pa'ak. We didn't have really the internet. It's like nobody knew about Pa'ak. You had to like know people who knew people back then. It was different clientele back then. And usually you were recommended Pa'ak in the early 2000s. And it was considered a dangerous place. I mean, there are like 6 countries on the embargo list. It's like North Korea, Iran, maybe Congo or something like that, and some other places. And then there's Myanmar, like places you really just shouldn't go, and I went there. So he told me about the place, and I grabbed the book, and I was reading the book while I was looking at these enlightened, they're supposed to be enlightened monks, and I'm reading Paul Oxido book. And so I quickly just bought a plane ticket. I left and I bought a plane ticket to go to Myanmar. And I still had a credit card with me. And so I had arranged for my credit card to be paid while I was traveling. and with my mother, because she was a co-signer on my bank account, and so I did a cash advance, bought a plane ticket, and I went to Myanmar. And at that time, I was anagarika. I was dressed in white clothes, white robes, and I went in there, and they don't get many Westerners, especially that time. Definitely the ones dressed in like yogi robes, and the anagarika, the Thai anagarika robes. I just had, a shoulder cloth, no shirt or anything, and it was January. I think it was January when I came there. And I remember being in the line, and the security people, they were like, yogi, 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 yogi. And they just pushed me right through the line, just like I was a monk, as if I were a monk. When you're a monk, you get to go through immigration really quickly. So so then I had Pa'ak written on a piece of paper, and I went into the Abhidhamma Propagation Society. It was like a booth. And I said, how do I get to this Pa'ak place? And they had a telephone there, which was rare.
Yes. So
you arrived in Myanmar on your anagarika robes.
Yes.
So I'm in the airport, and they pushed me right through like a monk. Monks have easy times in the airport in immigration, and but it was a little scary. I mean, there was like, there was a lot of security, and it was I was going to a place where it didn't have a good reputation, whatever. But I decided to go anyways, and I just wanted to go to the monastery. And so I had a piece of paper, and I went to, they had Pa'ak's name on it. I didn't even know, like, it sounds so foreign. And I had a piece of paper with me, and I went to the Abhidhamma Propagation Society, and they had a telephone there, which is rare. And they happened to know someone on the committee of Pa'ak, and so then I went to Pa'ak. They put me on a bus. I got put on a bus, and then they had someone pick me up from the bus station. Bus station in Myanmar is almost like an airport. It's like an airport. Like they have, I don't know if you've ever been on a bus in Myanmar. They have like ladies who are like flight attendants on the bus. So yeah, most people take the bus like you would take an airplane in America. And so anyways, I go to Pa'ak, and it was just incredible. I was just like, sign me up. I want to do this. And Pa'ak Sayadaw was sick at that time. He spent a lot of time in Singapore, and then he had just come back like a couple weeks after I was there. And he's like, when do you want to ordain? And I was like, let me make sure my credit card bill is paid off and that I have permission from my parents. And there was like a whole big thing about getting permission from my parents, but I eventually did. And then I ordained. It was February 7th, 2001. And it was really, really great. And there was 198 monks at my ordination day, but normal population day is actually about 122 at that time. So it was a very special day that I ordained, and it was like the annual meeting of Pa'ak, which was also the full moon day, and I asked if I could ordain on the full moon day. And so I ordained, and it was a really great life, and we could meditate, and I used to be very close to Sayadaw, and I used to walk up the mountain with him, and he used to send me his extra fruit. Fruit was very difficult to get at that time, and so it was good. We used to talk a lot. I used to suggest a lot of things like Americans do, and so it was really good. There was a problem with the visas. So one of the things I also wanted to fix before I ordained was a long-term visa. I say that in my Where to Ordain. Make sure you have a visa before you ordain. And they did my visa without going out of the country and coming back. And so they changed the class of the visa to a renewable religious visa without me going out of the country and coming back. And I was the first monk to actually do this new process. Someone knew someone who knew someone's Buddhist country, and so you could do all this type of stuff. And so I was the first person to actually do this new method. And in 2007, there was a new minister, immigration minister, and he wanted to do things more by the book. And he was looking at the history of everyone who was doing a renewal. And he looked at the original visa and he saw that mine was a tourist visa. And there was actually 300 other people, 300 other monks and visitors and whatever, who had done the same process, who changed the tourist visa over to a residential visa. And so then we all got kicked out. It was like 300 of us. We didn't get kicked out. We just didn't get a renewal. They didn't tell me whether I was rejected or not rejected. And a lot of times in Myanmar, the immigration office takes a long time, and then you end up having to pay late fees as part of the process. Like you submit it 8 weeks in advance, 6 to 8 weeks in advance, and it ends up still being late, and then you pay late fees. And this is also there's a problem, but it was just part of doing business. So I had like $100 or so of fees, and I just said, okay, I'm going to go to Sri Lanka. We had known every so often we have a group of monks from UCfAAWnrJfrfSJtlicrKVULw who come to Pa'ak to meditate, and they're usually the best of the best that they send. And so it looks like a good group of people, and instead of the general population that we see. And so I decided to go to Sri Lanka one way instead of going to Thailand up and down, because I was allowed to leave the country and come back with a sponsorship letter and do it properly. I was allowed to come back, but I decided that I wanted to change and that I would go to Sri Lanka one way for nearly the same price. And so I went to Sri Lanka in 2007. So that's how I ended up in Sri Lanka. And then what happened was there was a lot of people reordaining at that time. And I also decided to reordain as well, because I had some doubt about my original ordination, because someone accused my original ordination of not being valid, because I worried one of the times during one of the questions, I had a small bit of uncertainty, and I didn't really know, but I said, okay, well, they ask about whether are you free from government service? And so I remember I knew that meant that if you're in active duty and you're a deserter, that's what it means. But in between, like the ceremony, they ask you twice. One is sort of for practice, and another one is the real thing. And as soon as they asked me during the ordination ceremony, are you free from that? I started to remember about being registered for the draft, something that all Americans have to do. And on top of that, I had made a big thing over it too. So I refused to sign it until they threatened to put me in jail. And then I signed it. So I remembered, and I was like, does this count? Does this count? Does this count? And I'm like, no, it can't count. I'm too old, and I have a college degree, and there's so many other reasons I can get out of it. And then I also thought, I was like, well, there's American monks. Obviously, I met American monks before. If it was not possible, then they wouldn't ordain either. I was like, you're just acting crazy. You're just worrying too much. And I said, I'll say yes, and I'll check tomorrow. And so I said yes, that I'm free from the obligation of I'm not a deserter and not in active duty. And it's called Rajabutosi. And I checked with a Sri Lankan monk who's famous for accusing monks of doing the wrong things, and he's got a pretty big pointer finger. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that until much later, actually. And he said, oh, you answered correctly, but it's a moment of truth. You're not supposed to be worried. You're not supposed to be embarrassed. You're not supposed to be afraid. And they tell you that. And so if you answer if you are worried, afraid, embarrassed, whatever, then it's considered lying. And so then, but I didn't fully evaluate this, okay, because I I had pushed out my doubt actually right before saying yes. Actually, it wasn't like a conscious lie. I thought it was good enough. And so anyways, he said that my ordination, because I lied, I lost my samanera. And then there used to be a myth. It only disappeared like 6 years ago, that you had to be a samanera in order to ordain as a full monk. And if you didn't do that, then your ordination wasn't valid. And so anyways, when I went to Sri Lanka, this is like the epicenter of this type of doubt. And so I got a little worried about my ordination. It all came back to me. And so then I reordained. It had nothing to do with like Pa'ak's ordination procedure. It was just all me. And it turned out, like, I think during COVID or something like that, one of the teachers, he says, so why did you reordain? And I said the whole thing. And then they had to research whether it mattered or not. And so it was only like in like 21 or something like that, 2021 or 2020, that like people started to look at this, whether it really mattered. And you can ordain directly as a layperson, actually. So I lost 6 years in my seniority. This vassa, I'll be 20 vassa. But all in all, it's part of the experience. And, we learned, there was a lot to learn. I became a junior monk again. And I went through the process of being a junior monk. And so that was good. It was a good experience. And I stayed at UCfAAWnrJfrfSJtlicrKVULw for about 6 vassa, I think it was. And I stayed there until 2012. And then I went back to Pa'ak. There was a big heat stroke there. There was big sort of a heat wave there. And I needed to go to the mountains. And there was a retreat going on in 2012 at UCfAAWnrJfrfSJtlicrKVULw. It was the first opening of UCfAAWnrJfrfSJtlicrKVULw, the new section. It's a different section that you might know UCfAAWnrJfrfSJtlicrKVULw. That there's a few sections of UCfAAWnrJfrfSJtlicrKVULw. Memu, we call it. And there was a university section, and it was just opening up, and we heard that it's cold there, and one of my friends wanted to go there, and I decided that I wanted to go too. And I sent an email to someone I know, and we got the sponsorship letters very quickly, and we went as a group. And then I was in Myanmar for some time. Yeah.
So this 2012. Yep. Yes. And then from there,
2001
yes.
First ordination.
Yes.
Yeah, 2001 first ordination. Then 2007 go to Sri Lanka. 2012 go back to Myanmar. And then I stayed in Myanmar. I did a trip in Hawaii where I just wandered around Hawaii. I wanted to do that. It was like my dream. And then I took a monk who's actually the abbot of IIT, International Institute of Theravada, but he wasn't at that level at the time when we went. And then I went back to Pa'ak, and then I went again to Hawaii for a year and a half. The first trip was 6 months, and the second trip was a year and a half. And I was by myself because I finally memorized the Patimokkha, so I felt confident that I could go alone. After 17 years as a monk, I never went alone back to America. And so then after that I went back to Pa'ak, and then we had COVID, and then International Institute of Theravada was opening up, and I decided that I need some pariyatti experience. And I also had a medical problem. I couldn't meditate. Meditation was making it worse. And so I decided that I could just shift gears, sort of reinvent myself, and still find satisfaction and progress in my monk life. And so I ended up at the International Institute of Theravada, which is a pariyatti monastery. And I did that for 2.5 years. I can't remember which. And then I decided I wanted to phase myself back into meditation, and also, but do it slowly. And I started a master's program at a university in Colombo, in Kalenia. And it's just on Saturdays. So you have a lot of free time. And so I did that. It's geared for working people. So so that's the stage where I'm at right now. I finished all the classes and working on a thesis, and now we're in the present.
Well, there was quite a journey. Thank you for sharing all that. What really stood out for me that I hadn't heard of anything is, in since being a fellow American, I guess here, this notion of the draft. And I had to do that too. And this was before I was, still completely asleep. And I just want to say, wow, what a good fortune and karma you have to come to the Dhamma the way you did. A lot of the people I have gone through the dukkha door, let's just put it that way, So it made my heart so bright and uplifted to hear what kind of good fortune you had around this compared to yeah, you know what I mean. But we all come in different ways, and they're all beautiful as far as I'm concerned to the Dhamma. And but this notion of the draft, and so what I'm thinking, or what's coming up, is like, did they give you everything they were going to ask you ahead of time? So my thinking is, maybe they didn't. Were they more spontaneous? Did they tell you what questions they were going to ask? Because if they would have told you ahead of time, you had time to reflect. But still, and could you go to teachers and ask them about that? Or how did you how did you manage that ahead of time for preparation? I guess is what I'm interested.
I read when I was in the when I was in Bhavana Society, I read the Buddhist Monastic Code. And I think I talked with Ajahn Thanesoro. I think I read the Buddhist Monastic Code before that. And I even called Ajahn Thanesoro. I met him. And so I knew a lot about it. And I knew the questions. And normally you just do it in Pali. And I said, I want to do it in Pali and English. And normally you just like read from a sheet, and you just read the Pali. And I said, I want to do Pali in English. Okay, we'll give you Pali in English. And that was the mistake. Actually, I just should have just read from the sheet in Pali and not really understood what it meant, and just gone through the motions. It just popped into my head, like, because
at the time you were saying it. At the time,
it was, they ask you twice. They ask you twice because during the ordination ceremony, one time is actually technically for practice, but it's the ceremony, okay? And then the other time is real. This is the standard ordination, Upasampada, Bhikkhu Upasampada ordination. And there's like 2 minutes, 3 minutes in between the two sets of questions when they ask you twice. And so all of a sudden it just pops in my head, like, so you have time to think, because they're doing some other stuff, they're chanting some other Pali, and before they ask you again for real, and then it just like popped into my mind. And there's a video, there's a blog post on this, and I talk about the whole experience, and but I pretty much explained the whole thing.
I'll have to check that out.
It popped in my mind. I asked the wrong. I was actually trying to help people who were reordaining. I was like, "Why are you reordaining?" And I was. They said that they had money. A lot of them, they use money. And so politically, they were telling people, there's a whole political thing going on there. They were telling people that if you use money, you're not a real monk, okay? Because you're a samanera, 10 precepts, and you take your 10 precepts just before your ordination too. And so then they have money in their pocket, they have money, and they're agreeing to the 10 precepts, okay? They're saying that they will take all 10 precepts, and using money is not a problem. Actually, it's a problem. It's not, but it's not going to cancel your novice ordination, okay? But when you break 5 precepts, any one of the first 5 precepts, you break your novice ordination, and so you're still sort of, actually we had to how do you call it? We had to, like, just really split hairs to try to find out. And like Ajahn Thanesoro wrote me and he says, don't worry about it, you're still a monk, you're still technically a monk, don't worry about it, and it's just undesirable. But his letter just came just the night before I was going to ordain, and I already told people I was going to ordain, so then I just decided. And then the night before, also someone told me about the monk who accused me, and that he also accused the Mahathera of bad things, and
so you've got
it was already decided, and I went through it, and I actually had Sayadaw-ji, Pa'ak Sayadaw-ji's permission. He was living in UCfAAWnrJfrfSJtlicrKVULw at the time. They wouldn't reordain me unless there was permission from Pa'ak Sayadaw. So I was just worried, and then they decided to let me ordain. I got permission, And Paul Excidoji didn't really understand my question, and he gave me permission. So,
it's a
it was only
fascinating
like
topic.
21 or something like that. People ask, like, why did you reordain?
I think it's a fascinating topic of real-time Dhamma, you know, and it's something that's really important. And it's well, you just illustrated the kind of Sangha, I wouldn't say politics, but the Sangha involvement that most of us, or at least lay people, to have we don't get to see behind the scenes of all the things usually going on like that a lot of times. So I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, the other thing, it ties into American politics too, with the draft.
I asked him, yeah. I asked Mahatera about this. He's like a Tipitaka side out. Okay. So he has like all the books memorized. Okay. And I don't know, they let me go through it. They let me go through with this. And I asked another monk, I said, well, why did he let me do that? He knew that. And the monk said, if you asked the right question, you would have got the right answer. And all I had to do was ask was my original ordination valid, or like, the issue was whether it was a lie. That was the only question I asked. And so then there's a whole other things. There's a whole chain of events that would happen if it was a lie. And so it was very difficult. And he was saying, well, it's not much of a lie, he said. I said, well, what is much of a lie, you know? And so he was trying not to have me reordained, because it was a problem. Paul Excidoji's there. But if I had asked, like, can a layperson directly ordain, he would have probably said yes. And another monk, his name is Diga Sugatawamsa, Venerable Diga Sugatawamsa. He said that if I had asked the right question, I would have got the right answer. But, you know, as Popeye says, I am what I am. So
I think it's great to show.
Once you wear the bed sheet and reordain, everything's gone. So I'll be 20 wasa this year. This rainy season will be my 20th wasa. I would be 25 already today, but I'm not even ready to be a 20 wasa monk. My friend actually just said that to me. He's like, you're going to be a 20 wasa monk. You're not ready for that. You don't act like that. And because I act childish a lot of the time. So I'm like learning how to speak Sinhala, and I'm speaking Sinhala like a baby because I don't know how to speak Sinhala. So
it's probably better than mine, though. No, I think that the innocence and the purity is something that should be rejoiced in and celebrated, you know. And for me early on, I was confusing innocence and with naivety, and it's not the same thing, you know. Innocence and you know, it's not the same as being naive. They're completely different things. When I was confusing the two, so I think it's a beautiful thing to have this when it's called for and appropriate. Yes, and of course balancing it with maturity as well. So they're both. Those I think can be held, but I think that speaks really well to how to the letter of the Dhamma. And from what little I've heard of your teachings and sharings, I find really inspired that you seem to care deeply about, you know, I would just say like the pure Dhamma, you know, that I shouldn't say getting it right, but like what's really wholesome and skillful and beneficial, and what's been handed down to us kind of as our birthright in the Buddhist teachings is really important to you. And I find that really inspiring. And, you know, so I think Ahsoka will ask about maybe some of this later, but I want to jump into some of the Dhamma questions we have. And I don't normally prepare and do script, but I think it would help keep me on track. So, you know, there's still room for spontaneity here, I think. But let's jump into concepts, right? I mean, I'll start with my own thing. You know, I'm familiar with kind of, you know, on a lay level of Buddhist concepts, and they've helped me so much, you know. But then when I come to learning that even the breath is a concept, and I'm like, what? Yeah. I just couldn't wrap my head around. Okay, the body is a concept. Then I get that a little bit more, because, you know, where does like this skin really start and stop? You know, we're shedding stuff. So I kind of get that. But the breath is like, okay, no, this is embodied. This is reality. But no, it's not. It's the body is a concept, right? So as
Right.
much as this has helped me, what I started to get to or drawn to the system is there's an emphasis eventually, and of course I'm not there yet, of discerning ultimate materiality and ultimate mentality, because that there is an ultimate, right? And I practice with people who I have no reason to believe that they're lying. That there's a few that are at this level, and I don't need to get into comparison, conceit, and things like this, but it's so inspiring for me. And so I thought, all the other people who blow this off that say, you know, you don't need to practice at that level or anything like that. I'm like, well, I need to see and know at that level myself before I can determine whether it's needed or not. So it's a long introduction to start with, just start talking about concepts and like what role do they play in practice, and how they can be wholesome and useful, how they can be kusala, and maybe how they cannot. So I don't, it's kind of a big topic, but I'll let you just run with it however you want here.
Well, I think that we have a conventional truth, and then we have the ultimate truth, right? And even the Buddha, he referred to himself as a Buddha. He referred to other people. He used the word you. He didn't say, "Oh, Nama Rupa over there."
Well,
Why are
Tathagata,
you
right?
doing?
Tathagata, though.
Yeah, but he was like, yeah, that's true. But he called himself a truth seeker. He called himself the thus come, thus gone. But actually, he called people by name. Name is a concept. He he called people bhikkhus. He called his monks bhikkhus. So bhikkhus is a concept. So he used these concepts. He didn't say nama rupa. He didn't say, he didn't start naming off the materiality,
Everything in
28
the
types
third
of
person.
materiality,
Yeah.
He didn't say, I'm he didn't say listen closely and I will tell you. He did say listen closely, I'll tell you. He didn't say, he says watch my wachi kama. Wachi. He didn't say like the words not, it's just slipped from my mind as I wanted to say it. But he didn't say it's not coming to me. But he didn't talk about kalapas. He didn't talk about the chitta rupas, causing the speaking. He didn't talk about the chitta rupas talking about movement. He didn't talk about all the different types of consciousness and the VTs and the whole way they work, but he just used bhikkhus, and he used people's names, and he spoke actually in the sutta level. He spoke in very conventional terms, actually. And what we do is we take the Abhidhamma, which is sort of the footnotes below that, and it explains it. So like we say water, I think I said this before. So we say water, but like if we really looked at the scientific footnotes as to what water is, it's H2O, right? It's hydrogen and oxygen, two oxygens and a hydrogen. And it's just easier to say water, right? But chemically, in the ultimate truth level, it's just elements, right? It's just molecules. And so we have to communicate. And even the best physicist and the best chemistry person, he's gonna say, give me a glass of water. I need a glass of water. He's not gonna say what he really knows deeply. He's gonna speak in conventional truths, and he's gonna identify things with conventional truths. And so when we have practice in terms of conventional truth, so like we do loving kindness for people, for beings, it's a sattasanya. Sattasanya is the object of loving kindness, and that's a concept. It's as long as you are not looking at the paramatta, as long as you're not looking at like the ultimate truths, like the on the atomic level for mind and matter, then you are dealing with concepts. You're dealing with concepts. So this is the difference between samatha and vipassana. But vipassana, you take real realities, and then you see them, and then you apply the three characteristics to them: the anicca, dukkha, and anatta. It's impermanent, suffering, and non-self. And so I think I lost you actually, but I'll just keep talking.
No, I'm still here. Yeah. And to sum up, the Buddha said we use conventional language, but we don't get fooled by it.
So generally speaking, with concepts like loving kindness, we have concepts, of a person that we're giving loving kindness to. And in any of the four Brahma Viharas, any of those, right? And so we're giving it it's actually satta sanya. You have the perception of living beings, and you're doing loving kindness this way. When you follow sila, actually we're supposed to see like the human as dead, right? We even have a chant. We have a chant with the four requisites. After we do the four requisites, we have a Sri Lankan chant that we do. It's in Pali, but it's in the Sri Lankan tradition. Maybe it's in the Thai tradition too. We share a lot of things with the Thai tradition in Sri Lanka. And we say nisato nivjivo. So it's like it's not a being, it's not living, right? And because if we look at it in the ultimate reality and just elements, okay, this is like I'm just a dead robot, warning. So I'm just a robot with software and elements. And but with morality in killing, like you perceive life, right? So you have to perceive life in order to kill, in order to be guilty of that, of killing. So we have to apply concepts to morality in the precepts, even like just basic ones, like the first 5 precepts. So we have to use concepts, but for samatha, and maybe this will clarify something for you, is that concepts don't change.
Well, can you say more about
stable.
that?
So that's
Yes.
why we so if we with the breath, okay, a lot of people get confused about the breath, okay. So what happens is most people end up paying attention to 4 elements when they're focusing on the breath. What are they doing? They're focusing on the touch of the breath, okay. And the touch of the breath happens because of 4 elements striking the body door. They usually focus on there's hardness, roughness, heaviness, softness, smoothness, light, right? So these are the 6 qualities of earth element. Usually people focus on heaviness, and they usually get uncomfortable because they're focusing on heaviness or heat, so this is the fire element. They might be focusing on flowing. Normally you really, technically, I covered this before, that in the ultimate reality world, you don't experience a water element, or flowing cohesion. You don't really experience that actually on the Paramattha level. On the for the Potaba, for the Kaya, for the body door, and then there's the air element, which is pushing, pulling, and supporting. So usually, if you're focusing on the breath, you're focusing on one of those. Especially if you've done like a Goenka course or something like that, you're feeling sensations and stuff like that, you get really confused. And so that's focusing on realities instead of focusing on concepts. What is a concept? Breath is breath. So how do I explain it? So sometimes I explain it like traffic. So you're in America, right? And you've been in Thailand, right? So you can
just Thai forest monasteries. I haven't been yet. Oh, sorry. Sorry, that was a rhetorical question. Yes. Yeah.
So in America, there's lots of traffic. You might have a clear lane, and there might be just endless cars. Okay, so if we look at if the instruction is to look at vehicle as a concept, okay, then you look at and you'll see like, oh, this is Toyota, this is a Mazda, this is Tesla, this is a Ford F-150, this is a white car, there's a blue car, so these are different characteristics of cars. We have the make, manufacturer, different type of vehicle. One could be a motorbike too. And but if we look at vehicle, then it's like a shared general characteristic. And so if you're driving by and next time you're driving and you have traffic in the opposite lane, take a look at all the cars and try to only pay attention to the general characteristic. That's what a concept means. And you could look at the books behind you, and you can look at a bookshelf, and you could just pay attention to the quality of book instead of thick book, red book, blue book, like this. So you can just pay attention to the general characteristic.
That's right.
And so you can.
I was going to say that, yeah, the example I've heard too is wood. So whether it's a wooden table, sawdust, you're burning it, or it's still growing as a tree. It's wood, right?
Yeah, that's a little different though. That's a little different. Yeah. I mean, because it's divided, and I think the idea of the cars, like I told you,
yes, that's a good one,
is good, and to pay attention to. You can also name something, and I think that's very useful, is to just know its presence without the characteristics of the 4 elements.
Exactly. That was a huge game changer too. I was like, what? Body sensations are just the 4 elements changing. Oh, I thought that was, what I'm supposed to. Yeah. So it's really interesting. So I think we can use this as a bridge to the POC system because, in my own practice, I switched to, Kasina because I was having so much challenge with the breath. I have all these good teachings on how to do breath meditation. And am I disrespecting this teacher if I don't do it their way and then this way? And then I was really confused, like, how is a nimitta what does light have to do with breath? And I could get to like maybe a concept of the breath and knowing it as a concept. But then it's like, how is that going to bridge over into light and this and that? And so it was just really helpful to set all that aside for now and doing Earth Kasina. But what I guess, so I'm probably everybody listening to this has some background.
You're doing Earth Kasina.
Yes, I am. Yes. And it's so lovely and wonderful and so great. And there seems to be just a really a natural draw to it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Yeah. I remember I read the Visuddhimagga, and while I was at Wat Pah Nanachat, I was like making my own Earth Kasina, and I didn't know what to do, and I'm just reading the book and trying to make an Earth Kasina, and I remember I saw like Paul Excido, I read Knowing and Seeing, and I'm like, oh my God, there's actually a teacher who knows all these objects and and who can teach, and I was like, wow, I got to go, and I just had this Dhamma urgency, and I just like went, but that's good if you feel connected with it. It's good actually. People like search long and hard for the different for the exact color of Earth actually, but they might think that it's like really difficult to find, but actually it's in the time of the Visuddhimagga they didn't have pavement and there was just Earth everywhere.
Yeah, and if you can go to the Ganges River too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I have a short video where I'm walking on a path, okay? I'm walking on a dirt road, and it's like that perfect color. And I'm like, just like, I was like, people struggle to find the right color and this and that. And I never really answer like, here it is right there. But I'm just like walking and just filming the road while I'm walking. And so, yeah, I hope it works out for you with Earth Kasina. And White Kasina also, usually people like White Kasina, usually people who get confused with Earth element with breathing, they do well with the White Kasina. So
yeah, and I think even the
people do different things. People like space. There's one person I know likes space. So there's always something special that people feel connected with. But let me tell you one thing, that in the POC system, they will let you do anapana for years and years and years, and they'll only change you if you ask.
That's what I had to do. That's right, with my teacher. Yes.
Yeah, I asked Sayadaw Kenya once, and I said, why don't they change people? And he says, if they ask, we change. If they don't ask, we don't change them. This is the rule. I remember him saying this to me, maybe around 2004 or something like that.
And I didn't know that.
He told me that more than 20 years ago. And I still remember because it was such a shock that they would let people do that. Yeah.
So I guess, the people listening to this will probably have some background. I'm imagining there's some that won't, though. So I think maybe we'll just how about a brief overview? So from my understanding, it's a big mixture of Visuddhimagga and Abhidhamma, but it's all also firmly grounded in suttas too.
Sayadaw. The Pa'ak is a village in Myanmar, okay, and it's the name. It's a concept. It's the name. It's the name of the village in Myanmar near Malamyine. And Pa'ak Sayadaw Ji, he was practicing in the forest, and the previous Pa'ak Sayadaw, there was a forest monastery in that outside of the village, and it's called Pa'ak Forest Monastery. And the leader, the abbot of that, is called Pa'ak Sayadaw. Sayadaw means teacher. So he's the abbot. They might have other monasteries, but he was the teacher of that forest monastery. So they call him Pa'ak Sayadaw because of that. So this monk, who is the second one, he was going to die soon, and he decided that Pa'ak Sayadaw he asked him to be the abbot of this monastery, which was very small, but had a lot of land. And so it was very small in population, but had a lot of land. And so he took it over, and then a couple of weeks later, he died or something like that. The second Pa'ak Sayadaw died. And Pa'ak Sayadaw became the third Pa'ak Sayadaw. His real name is Sayadaw Uachina, and it means habitual karma. But we call him Pa'ak Sayadaw Ji. And now, before we just called him Sayadaw, he was like just say Sayadaw and like he's the one, okay? But after like 20 years, like people he ordained actually became 20 years. They became established teachers, so they called them Sayadaws as well. And so then they called Sayadaw Ji, Big Sayadaw. So that's what Pa'ak is.
And if we want to just jump into the system, and I'll throw in comparison with kind of Thai forest tradition, because Ani and I, that's where we met at Amaravati, and most of it has been at practices there. And so I'm more diplomatic in things. Like I want the true real Dhamma to the highest level, but I also recognize that there's approaches that, like on the conceptual level we're talking about, that are skillful means for meeting people where they're at currently on their journey, but not at the expense of distortion too. So walking these lines between like what's skillful and helpful, and what's the real true Dhamma, but at the same time also not causing divisions and schisms. Good. But I just like to look at commonalities when I can, but also let truth be the guide, and then how I go about doing that, right? Like the how is really important to system. Like the main things are, was the previous Pa'ak Sayadaw, was he practicing kind of the same approach and system as the current Pa'ak Sayadaw? And if you just want to go in a brief overview of the Samatha Vipassana phases.
I've never heard of that, actually. Yeah. The Abhidhamma is everywhere, actually. What gets exported to the West is actually a lot of the Abhidhamma rejection. And so, but the Western practitioners of Buddhism is very small, and it's actually fringe Buddhism with rejecting the Abhidhamma and the commentaries. So generally speaking, I don't know anything about the first and second Pa Sayadaw. I think that it was a Vinaya place, and it was a place to practice. At that time, most of the monasteries were usually, when people practiced, it was just Mahasi. It was Mahasi, Mokok, and there was a couple other methods, but the main methods were Mahasi and Mogok. So I think the main thing was that it was a Vinaya place, and they had a forest, and I don't know anything before that. So Pa Sayadaw Ji, he wrote these like 5 books. He wrote this like master thesis detailing pretty much the Abhidhamma Sangaha and the Visuddhimagga, which are both very practice based. And he wanted to see if people could get jhana. People didn't believe jhana was possible before Pa. They didn't think it was possible. They didn't think it was possible to see mind and matter. And so Pa Sayadaw Ji, after he got his degree as a Dhammacharya, that means a teacher, he passed some exam levels, then he decided, like, can we see this stuff? Can we practice and actually do what people said? And so then he started writing, like, he wrote these 5 books, which were banned actually by the Sasana committee, and it was like the Streisand effect, and everyone got interested in these books that were banned. It wasn't really banned. It was, in order to make a Buddhist book, to publish a Buddhist book in Myanmar, you need Sasana approval, Sasana committee approval, and he didn't get that. They didn't want to approve his book. So he was known enough internationally at that time, a little bit. And so they printed the books in Taiwan, and they brought him over to Myanmar, and everyone wanted his books. And so that's how he became famous, was from the Streisand effect of them not approving his book. And everyone wanted to, all the Myanmar people there in Sayadaws, they wanted to get his 5-volume set. I think it's called Nibbana Ji, so it means like big Nibbana. And so basically, you really have to be familiar with the Abhidhamma Sangaha and the Visuddhimagga to understand what the course is. Pa Sayadaw Ji himself will say that he didn't make anything up. He basically just took the content of the Visuddhimagga, the Abhidhamma Sangaha, and sort of systematically layered it in a certain pathway so that you could practice it. It starts off with the samatha course. So like we just said, you spend years doing Anapana or whatever. Usually people who get successful in Anapana, they within a couple months, few months, the nimitta will pop up, and then they'll stabilize their nimitta. It takes a couple months, and then they start going through the jhanas. If they have the parami, they have the parami. If they don't have the parami, you got to work on it. So this is when things get a little. This is when people spend years developing, even lifetimes, and you just have to understand how samsara works, and just know that you're developing for your next life or this life. Maybe you hit it this life. So there's one monk I knew who didn't get it until 10 years. He didn't get jhana until 10 years of practicing. So people can get it at different stages, but most people get it within the first few months. If they're really practicing, they're really trying, they'll get it within the first few months. Then, so they get these jhanas, which is a state of concentration, which is very deep. It's very one-pointed, one-focused, and it's considered a superhuman attainment, and it's where there's extreme concentration on a single object, and it's a little bit like the concentration is so strong, the mind is only working on one single object. And a long time ago, we used to have like when the processors were single processors and stuff like that, and you had like your computer got locked up or something like that, or if you're programming actually and you make a loop that doesn't end, that's usually what happens when you have buggy software in the 90s. And what happens is it just goes through a loop, and it eats up all your processor time, and it's just doing one little thing. And if you don't have the right logic in there, just keep repeating. And so the jhana is a little bit like that. So you're spending all your processor time on a single object, and so it becomes very powerful rather than being scattered. And so there are 40 different samatha objects. They're objects of calm concentration, and we say that, and there's usually 4 levels: first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. So there are 40 different objects. Not all of them can get the jhanas. They can get the neighborhood concentration, axis concentration, some of those objects. Like 4 elements doesn't get jhana. So there are 40 different objects, and they go through all 40 objects. They try to get them to go through all 40 objects. Usually they can. And then they do 4 elements, which is also it's not vipassana, it's actually a samatha object. And then they bring them through the rupa course. They try to see like materiality, all the materiality in their body at the kalapa level, which is, might want to say, like atomic level. When I say the atomic level, it's not like atoms in science. I'm saying the atomic level in terms of English, what atomic level means, meaning like the basic building block level. And so they teach the yogis to see the materiality in their body, and then to also understand how the 6 sense doors work, and how the materiality, the sensitivity works in the eye and the ears and the nose and the tongue and in the body. And so they look at that, and then they also look at the mind door as well, and they see the different types of materiality in each of the sense bases. And then so to give you some sense of time frame, the samatha course, the developing of concentration, one-pointed concentration, all 40 objects, sometimes that can take 9 months to a year.
And mastery, where mastery, you can do the mastery in whichever jhanas are involved too, right? So
yeah, if they do the 14 ways, I think you know about the 14 ways. They used to never do the 14 ways until
just because I know about it doesn't mean I'm anywhere close to it, though. Yeah, but the 5 jhanic masteries when it, so yeah. You said not. I was just saying, just because I know about that doesn't mean that I'm anywhere close to that, which is, it's an interesting, but we are delayed a little bit.
So it takes about like 9 months, and that's like usually like after you get jhana. That's after you get the first jhana.
Bhante, I think if you want to just, I guess, since most people will never, I would venture, hopefully not though, most people will never get close to the Vipassana stage. Why don't you just sum up where we left off the Vipassana, and then if you want to say anything about Thai forest tradition.
Nama, after they do the Rupa Kammatthana, then where they're looking at the mind door, they're looking at the sense doors in the materiality sense. Then what they do in the Nama is they look at the mentality, the consciousness, and how the consciousness goes to the mind, how the consciousness goes to the sense doors, and how it goes to the mind, and how it does all these different, we could say, preparatory consciousness in order for the javana to happen, where the javana is where when we feel an emotion, that's sort of what you experience. And also the jhana, the concentration, is also there in what we call the javana process. So you learn the 6 sense doors and what we call vittis, or mental processes, and you learn about all the 6 sense doors and how they interact from a mental point of view. And the rupa, you learn about the 6 sense doors from a physical point of view. And then after you do that, then they have another sort of like a review, where you look at characteristic, function, manifestation, and proximate cause of both nama and rupa. Is that correct? Yeah. And so then, so you really basically got to do the courses again, and the rupa course again, and the nama course again, so that you get better at it. And then the next part would be the dependent origination. And so that's like the sexy stuff where you get to see the past lives, and usually you trace like 4 or 5 lives. 5 lives is usually standard. Sometimes they do more. They do that in the back, and then they do what you do is you end up doing the rupa and the nama course for each life. And so after you do that, so you do that for your first life, and you connect the first life and your first past life and your present life together. You're connecting them, and so you're seeing past causes and future results, which would be the present life. And then you take those two lives and you go back another life, and then you go back another life, like that. And so that's what they do. And then they go into the future. So you have your present life causing future lives, and then you can go into the future, how many ever future lives you have.
Potential
And
futures,
so,
yes.
Potential future, yeah, potential futures, and that can change. Future, past doesn't change, but the future can change. So then when you finish that, and there's different methods for dependent origination. You start with the 5th method first, actually, which is like a beginner method. And then after that, then you start looking at, there are 40 characteristics of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. There are 40 characteristics of impermanent suffering and non-self. And they look at that, and this takes a long time to do, because then what you do is you do each characteristic, and you do paticca samuppada again, looking at each. You do it for the 5 khandhas. You do it 40 times. You do it like 200 times. So it takes a long time. And
these are the toes.
These are the toes, the 40 toes. Yeah. This is called samasana yana stage. And so this is what they call vipassana. This is like when you make it to vipassana. It's not really considered vipassana after you do dependent origination. And then you get like a 10-day Goenka course, and it's called vipassana. So there are different interpretations of what practice is, and maybe this will tie back to the Thai system. So the Myanmar system is actually based off of the text, especially the Pa'ak system. It's based off of the text, specifically the Visuddhimagga and the Abhidhammatta Sangaha. Bhikkhu Bodhi translated. It's called the Comprehensive Manual of Abhidhamma. And so this is it's based off of the like pariyatti. It's applying the pariyatti. It's not really separate. The pariyatti is like a roadmap, and following that. And the Pa'ak course brings back the faith in the pariyatti. Before, it was a theoretical system that nobody actually practiced, and it was and people lost faith in it. They didn't think things were possible anymore. And it used to be just an intellectual game, almost, of hopeful thinking. Maybe it's possible. Maybe they were able to see this 2,000 years ago, but all hope is lost for the present. And so what they did was they gave up on samatha, and they went directly to vipassana, of what they interpreted as vipassana. And this would just be feeling, if it's Goenka, it's feeling the sensations in the body. So in the Pa'ak definition, how this is paying attention to kaya pasada. It's like paying attention to one of the 28 rupas in materiality course. This is just rupa kammatthana. Actually, it's not even, they call it Vedanupassana, but it's actually really sort of like kaya nupassana. So then the Mahasi method is to pay attention to the sense doors and to try to anchor yourself with the belly breathing in and out, and then to pay attention to the sense doors if they arise, and they call that vipassana. And you can do like a 2-week vipassana course. You can do a 3-month vipassana course, whatever. And so this is what they did. The Thai forest tradition, actually, they sort of just said, okay, well, monks lived in the forest, let's try to live in the forest too, and let's practice, and let's look at the suttas. And they sort of had pride that they didn't know what the texts were. They didn't have this technical knowledge. Ajahn Chah actually was a scholar monk, and he knew the Abhidhamma actually, but the other monks, they didn't know what was possible, what was not possible. And so they had experiences, and Thai tradition. So they went into they didn't know much about pariyatti, as far as I know, and I think they prided they sort of boasted that they didn't know the pariyatti, and they just sort of felt their way. And I guess they had some monks who felt like they were enlightened, and they told other people, and whether they are enlightened or not enlightened, it's not for me to say, but they talk about things that are not in the text, that are not possible in the text. Specifically, they talk about this chitta thing, and maybe it fits into the text and I'm just not aware of it. There are also stories of like, it's in Ajahn Mun's book that, when Ajahn Mun became an arhat, that the Buddha came to him and, sort of gave him a nod, and all his disciples who are arhats also sort of walked by him, gave him a little nod, and then previous Buddhas, lined up with their disciples, and they gave him a nod on the night of his arhatship. So this is part of the this is part of Ajahn Mun's book, autobiography. I think it's the biography of Ajahn Mun, and it talks about this. And this would be like not possible, but then people say, well, in the commentaries, they actually talk about how all the Buddha relics will come together, and the Buddha will give a Dhamma talk. And so they say it's something like that to sort of justify it. So, but I don't believe that it's difficult for me to believe that that's really possible. And,
Yeah,
and
that's
Ajahn Mun,
that,
he said he didn't sleep. He would just sleep sitting up, and so anyways, that's part of the tradition of Ajahn Chah. They stay up all night, and because that's when you're gonna become enlightened. The Mahasi method, actually, you stare at a clock. You stay up the whole night. Like when you get to the advanced stage, you stare at a clock. I heard about this, and I asked the teacher about this, and he said, yeah, it's true. And you stare at a clock, and then like 30 minutes, you're up all night, okay, and 30 minutes might pass like it would be like 1 second. And you're like, wow, 30 minutes passed. And so then you this would be going into nibbana or something like that. And so in the Pa'ak world, they would say that this is going into a bhavanga. It's like a deep sleep state, and it's often confused with nibbana. And so you should be aware. But then what they do is they can project their mind back, and they can remember it. So whether it's nibbana or not, there's controversy in that. And I think Paul Sayadaw, he might have been a little critical about that, and I think that's why his book wasn't approved for publication. And he was, the thing is that you need vinaya in order to get the jhana. If you're a monk, you need to follow the rules, and without Paul Sayadaw, pretty much the rules wouldn't exist right now in Myanmar, because all the monasteries that are, they're either Pa'ak or the monks themselves who are independent came from Pa'ak, most of them. So like Mahavihara, I think that monk is a Pa'ak monk. There's also another monastery called Varanasi, and they also, he's a Pa'ak monk. And then there's all the Pa'ak branches as well. So it's like 60 branches now. So
it's become an institution. Yes.
Yeah. So there's one monk, his name is Sayadaw U Chanima, and he's, if you got 60 monasteries and one monastery has a big problem, once a year, basically you just got constant problems. I feel really sad for him. He's like always just dealing with a lot of stuff, and he's handling all the work that Pa'ak Sayadaw Ji used to handle. And so anyways, yeah, so they have different methods and they have different explanations of what Nibbana is. Pa'ak Sayadaw, so some people say you should blank out. It's impossible to actually know that you're in Nibbana because there's no consciousness. So they're confusing Parinibbana with the description of Parinibbana with the actual attainment of Nibbana, like fruition attainment. So it's Palasamapatti. So they're confusing that, and Pa'ak Sayadaw Ji, he'll answer that, say that it's a wholesome consciousness, and the wholesome consciousness has sati in there, and so you should be aware of what's going on. On the other hand, Bhavanga also is a wholesome consciousness, and there would be sati in there as well. So it's difficult to, if you're human, you have a wholesome consciousness, Bhavanga consciousness. So there would also be sati in there, but we experience that when we're sleeping as well.
Yeah, Bhavanga
so
is
that's
sorry with
that's
the delay.
Usually, So usually that's those are the different aspects. Usually the Thai monks don't come to now if they go to Sri Lanka, they don't go to Naoena. They might go to a place I went to before. It's called in Hantana. They might go there. They might go to Mitrigala, which is a Mahasi place. Usually stay clear away from Naoena, which is a Pa'ak method place. And then, or they just do like a trip, just see the spiritual sites. And then usually when they go to Burma, they don't go to Pa'ak. Usually they don't mix well. But there's actually one monk, I think he's from Sweden or Austria, and he was very interested in Pa'ak, and he went to now Uyana, and he's actually he's somewhat of a leader of the foreigners there. I've heard he's supposed to be a really good monk and really good meditator, I think. So I can't remember his name, but so the Thai tradition has a lot of forest monk things, which are very respectable. And Myanmar is usually more based on sort of the meditation center monastery. It's a monastery. They do monastery functions. They do monastery things. They ordain monks, and they have kutis and everything. It's more sort of like a meditation farm, and it's just growing. They have this forest life, where they're doing a lot of forest stuff. They even do this tudong thing. They live in the forest. They go to Pujam Dowdum, I think it's called Dowdum, and they live in the forest, live with mosquito nets, and so they do a lot of stuff. It sounds really wonderful, but it's not very nice to live under a mosquito net. It takes a certain character to be able to do that. It's very, very difficult. And so the Myanmar is usually a little more comfortable, usually a little more, they give nicer kutis, and they make a meditation hall that's really nice, and it's more suitable for intensive concentration. Thailand, they want to be out in the forest. Sri Lanka is a little bit of both. It's like a little bit of a mixture of that. It's got a little bit of Myanmar, it's got a little bit of Thai mixed into the system. So it's a little bit in between both of those two systems.
That I've come to appreciate your sense of authenticity and remaining really very clear. I would like you to give us a sort of nutshell of what is, from your perspective, this authenticity and maintaining right Dhamma on track, especially in a time where, AI is coming into lives, and people now can, at the touch of a fingertips, have access to a number of teachings and teachers who that may not have been possible before. Double checking dependent origination online can come up as with a lot of mistakes as well. So that aspect of authenticity is really important in how you you present yourself and you present your knowledge. Something, if you could say something about how to tell the truth sometimes, and to tell it in a way that doesn't discourage the person to continue exploring what is their own path, because everyone enters the Dhamma in different ways. So there's a samavacha, so there's a right speech aspect, there's an authenticity aspect, there's an upaya aspect, skillful means. And I would like you to just, if you could just bring that together and say something from your perspective, how to approach that.
We always tell the truth, and there's no reason to lie, ever. Okay? If you have nothing good to say, don't say anything. Actually, I was talking and I just said, okay, I don't want to say what this says. I stopped myself. Okay? And so I think that's really important. But you're saying, like, you want to tell someone, you don't want to discourage them from the path or something like that, and you're wondering how you should speak. You should try to learn how to connect with people. You should try to learn, like, where you can connect with people. So in the Western world, people connect with loving kindness. They really like loving kindness. Who doesn't like loving kindness? So so you can connect with people with promoting, morality. You can connect with people with promoting like a universal morality. You can connect with people with concentration, loving kindness, and also just doing wholesome things, and mindfulness. Also, people like that too. So you can connect with people just on that, and you can just pick one of them. Loving kindness. You can pick loving kindness. So if you're doing loving kindness, you're gonna be following a lot of the precepts anyways. So the question is, like, with being authentic, okay, and doing the teaching. So I have a lot of faith in the commentaries in Abhidhamma and the suttas and the Vinaya. The whole, they call it the Tipitaka. I believe in everything, and I believe in most, even the sub commentaries and the what we call the pakaranas. And so these handbooks, like the Abhidhammatta Sangaha. So I really believe in these, but sometimes they're also a little off as well. Like when you get down to the third level, and the sub commentaries end up, and the handbooks end up being written by ancient elders. Okay, but the commentaries themselves were actually, theoretically, according to the legend, they were actually part of the Buddha's original teaching. They're written in a different language. It's all written in Pali, but the language is different because it was translated into Sinhala, and then what happened was they lost the original Pali, and then they translated it back into Pali. And so when they translated it back, it's a different quality of language. Like we have Old English and New English. It's not like that. Actually, the newer Pali is actually more complex, and a lot of people try to read the commentaries, and it's very complex to read. People get frustrated and angry that the Pali is written in this way. It doesn't necessarily have to be. Actually, they have words that are like this long, and it's just the way it was written. And so people get a little upset while they're trying to figure out what it says, and then they decide to reject it from there, or they have difficulty believing stuff from there. Nowadays with AI, we're able to explore without being a scholar. You can explore what the commentaries say. You can explore what the Abhidhamma says in the commentaries and the sub-commentaries of the Abhidhamma, etc. And you can read all that for yourself. Before, you were taking the word of someone who read some of the commentaries and tried learning Abhidhamma, or translated the Abhidhamma without learning it. So like started from the PTS. They called it the Valley of Dry Bones, because they were translating it just to translate it, and it was just like lists to them. And so they called it the Valley of Dry Bones. And so people read this, and then they start to, they might only say this like 15% of the time, but it sticks out. But the same is true when a lot of translators, they say, oh, I don't believe this. Even Bhikkhu Bodhi does this. And not often, but he does this. Like when he makes a footnote, he's usually making a footnote about something that's a little different than what you would logically expect it to be. That's what the commentaries are there for, to clarify. And people don't understand cross-cultural, when you go across the whole world, like as far as you can go, actually. People don't understand how many cultures you're crossing. And when they see a spray gun, for me, it's like, what is this kitchen sink thing doing in the toilet? And what are we supposed to do with that? And then an Asian person goes to a Western house and he's like, you have like a toilet brush that you wash dishes with? It's like a toilet brush to them. and I even showed, I remember I actually showed this to him. I said, I want to take a picture of this. He had a brand new one, so it was appropriate to take a picture. Usually they get really ugly looking. And I said, we're in Myanmar, and I said, I want to take a picture of this. And he says, why do you want to take a picture of this? I said, do you know that in America they wash dishes with this thing? And he was just, oh, that's disgusting. And so we have like the commentaries and the Abhidhamma. We're talking 2,600 years later, okay? And we're also talking a completely different culture. And so when people like read something like, how can this be? How can this be? And like in the PTS translation, there's a footnote. Like when the Buddha was dying, it said that you could fit 60 devas on the head of a needle. And it said, oh, this is just ridiculous. They can't imagine that. They haven't seen Fantastic Voyage. It wasn't made then. But it's, they have these things, and these things stick in people's minds. Sticks in my mind, because I read that actually in a paper book more than 20 years ago or something like that. So these things stick in people's mind. They come up with a judgment, and then we have like this thing called the EBT, where they reject the commentaries. They reject the commentaries because they usually take the Chinese as an authority, what survived in Chinese as an authority, and the commentaries are different, and the Abhidhamma is a little different. And so then what they do is they only take where the Chinese matches the Pali as an authority, then only this is really, really true. And but Chinese is, they're like the holders of the Mahayana, which says you're allowed to lie if you want to, to bring it full circle.
Oh, really?
And so anyways, in terms of being authentic, I think you mean about like the being authentic and true to the teachings. And a lot of times I you know, like we have third precept. The third precept is actually you can't have premarital sex. Okay. And you know, the way I tell people this, I'm like, you know, and for killing, you can't do abortions. You can't even speak in favor of abortions as a monk. And the way I tell people this is I mean, these days I've been exposed to this and I understand it better, and I understand that abortion is wrong. But I tell people, I say, look, I'm a monk. I have to say this, and I let people know in certain ways. One person asked me if being a poultry farmer is okay. Okay, and this is her livelihood. And she's asking me if it's okay. And I said, I can't say it's good. And so this is maybe skillful means where you're always telling the truth, but you're still telling the truth, but you're saying it in digestible ways. And so that's, you have to be skillful in saying things that is right for the person. But, you know, sometimes the Buddha, like there was the dog duty ascetic. There was an ascetic who pretended to be, he acted like a dog. And there's people like this today in India. There's even some guy in Japan who has a dog suit. He has like a $20,000 dog suit or something like that. And, you know, there's, and he asked the Buddha, is this really the way? You know, what will happen to me? And he says, don't ask me this. He says, you have to tell me. So you can't ask the Buddha more than 3 times. And so then he says, okay, I warned you. And he says, at best, your next life, you'll be a dog. He says, but if you're telling other people, if you believe that this is the way to salvation and you're telling other people to do this as well, you'll go into the worst of hells. And so sometimes the Buddha, he always speaks what is beneficial. He always speaks at the right time. And he always speaks the truth. But it's not always pleasant. Usually it's pleasant. But sometimes it's a bitter pill to swallow. And he tells it like it is. But most of the time, everything is just wonderful that the Buddha says. Yeah.
So this is interesting because it links up to a sort of corollary question I had on that, and which is a question I like to ask, and I have asked to several senior Rajan or senior Mahatera, and then I'm always getting similar questions, similar answers, but I really would like to put it to you. What are highlights quality for a teacher? Someone who is in a position who can teach the Dhamma, share the Dhamma, and put it, because it's also not being proselyte, so it has to be requested. But again, with computers and AI and everything is available at the fingertips. In ancient times or earlier days, people were taking an airplane and going to Asia to look for teachers. So what are highlight?
In ancient times, they would walk for days to visit a teacher.
Right. Ancient times, but ancient sometimes last century meant as well like ancient. But let's say that, what are the highlight qualities for a teacher? Like, how, it's a question that I've heard being asked as well, but it's also a question that I have at heart, because how do you actually choose to have a teacher and follow? And there are some highlights. So there is, on one part, it could be intuition. In one part, it could be just that there is a connection between what you're looking for and what the teacher is having. But there are also some aspect of teachers that need to be there, especially if the teacher is a monastic. So, you know, reference to a lineage. I would like you to speak about it. Otherwise, I start talking about this and it's a completely different answer. So highlights of teachers. And another corollary about that is, Are there any female teachers that have ever inspired you, or can you point to females in the Sangha as part of the Fourfold Sangha? Where are the women in there? And that would be my final question.
So in terms of a teacher, whether it's a layperson or it's a monastic, I think in your context, you're asking about monastics. Mm-hmm. You'd feel that this teacher has something to offer you that you're looking for at the very minimum. So even if you just want to go to chanting, if the monk knows how to chant, then this teacher can be a teacher for you and can help you with developing the wholesome. It depends on what you're looking for. You have to respect the teacher in order to learn from the teacher, and this actually is one of the things that's a problem with women who look for a teacher. So a lot of times the women don't respect women teachers. There are women teachers though, but we'll get into that later. So if you're a monastic and you're looking for a monastic teacher, you would want to make sure that they follow the monastic rules. So we have Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, right? So it would be very important to have a teacher who follows the basic first step of Sila. And so this would be good, and they know the rules, so they can teach you. If you're a monastic and you want to know the rules, you yourself should be eager to follow the rules. And so you'd want another monk who at least has that, and he has the knowledge in the rules, so he can teach you, or she can teach you the rules and lives by the rules, walks the practice. So that's very important. Teachers make mistakes though, but it depends how often, what they do, how they purify those mistakes, if they can purify those mistakes. So usually you want to, if you're a monk, I tell people like where to ordain. I have an article called Where to Ordain. I think both of you have probably read that. And I don't even bother with places that don't follow the rules, because you can ordain anywhere. You can just pick any monastery and ordain. So, and they're more common. It's very rare to find a place that generally follows the Vinaya. But that's if you're looking for a place to ordain. And then after that, do you want pariyatti place? Do you want to learn about pariyatti? And do you want to learn about meditation? And I guide people to try to figure out what their philosophy is, because usually when they're at the stage where they want to ordain, their philosophy is already set, like concrete. It's very difficult to change them. And so my goal of that was to sort of like recognize that I couldn't change them, and to guide people in a place that could fit. And the big thing is called philosophy matching. So you want to ordain at a place that follows the Vinaya, and you want to follow the place that matches your philosophy. Now the question is, are you skillful enough to know what's good for you? So a little kid would be like, he'd be like, chocolate cake is what I should be eating, and I'm going to eat chocolate cake, because he's a little kid. He doesn't know what's really good for him. Okay? And so you need a parent to say, no, you can't have that. And this would be a good teacher, but he might not match the philosophy of his parents about chocolate cake and how much he can have. So in terms of what I think is correct, is we should follow we have the Tipitaka. There's 3 baskets. We should follow all baskets. And then we should also follow the commentaries. We should find teachers who develop the practice, the meditation system based on that. that fits in that. And it's not just like one little thing and it says that's the whole practice. I mean, you can do that. You can take one of the you can take a small part of the teachings and just make it your specialty. But you should understand that about how everything is connected, how everything sort of works together in terms of all the texts, the Pali texts that we have, and you should follow that, have faith in that, and see if they're practicing that as well. But you might want to go to the Pariyatti realm. And a long time ago, the study monks, they didn't follow the Vinaya, and the practice monks, they followed the Vinaya, because in terms of the morality, because you need sila, samadhi, panya, you need morality to get concentration, to get wisdom, nibbana, right? So, but wisdom comes before nibbana. And so normally it was like that, but actually nowadays there are places where you can learn the text and follow the rules at the same time. It used to not exist before. We would just say, oh, he's a Pariyatti monk. We still say that, he's a Pariyatti monk. I go to university, I encounter, my professors, they're Pariyatti monks. There's no other way to explain that. And I can learn from them. And I'm very respectful. I bow down to them. And, I'm like, I recognize they're more senior to me, and I'll bow down to them and give them the respect. You have to respect the person at least. And you have to understand that this person can give me something that I'm seeking. And that is the correct Dhamma as well. You want to definitely see, you want to judge, am I following the correct Dhamma? That's really important. And you should see if it matches. So yeah, we have 89 chittas, but where is this chitta in the Thai tradition? So then they start saying, well, the chitta means something else or something. It can match some people will say it matches in the book, and some people say it's not in the book or something like that. So you have to decide what is the real Dhamma. For me, the Sad Dhamma, we say the Sad Dhamma, is the true Dhamma is what's in the Pali. So some people say, well, this is commentarial, this is Abhidhamma, this is not real. I only follow the suttas. The suttas are very wide, and you can make your own path within the suttas. And you also have to believe that the commentaries comes from there. You have to believe that the Abhidhamma comes from there. And so the Buddha even said that, this is what the Buddha said, this is what the Buddha did not say. And so this is how we get the authentic teachings, we get the authentic teachers. And so you look and see if you can get those authentic teachings. And you always tell the truth. And you try to be pleasant and try to avoid conflict, try to avoid things that would push people away. And the best thing to do is just talk about baby Dhamma and talk about loving kindness and try to stay away from that. Actually, my last online baby Dhamma course was quite deep. So I thought I'd just talk about, like, you see colors and you have an eye, and you hear sounds and you have an ear. Then I started talking about, and I have to, because it's just, I feel like I have to. And so then it became very complicated, where I was talking about mind moments and how the word hello sounds, on a mind moment level. And but yeah, we should just talk about loving kindness, and we can connect with people. In terms of female teachers, like I said, the females usually don't respect the female teachers, and so they're the female teachers are at a disadvantage. It's very difficult for female like there's a lot of women who finish the course, and very few of them are able to teach successfully. So so the big thing is that the women need a lot of attention. There's a lot more yogis also, and I was always like, well, why don't we just have them teach themselves? And they're like, it doesn't work, and they don't. It's a matter of the women not respecting. The monks we're fine. We'll learn from our own. We'll learn from our own, but the women actually choose not to respect the woman, and when they don't respect, they can't learn. So there are teachers like Nina Van Gorken and Sujin. They are lay women teachers with the especially with the Abhidhamma. I'm not really sure about other teachers. I don't really follow them in order to judge. There's different women who have some success with connecting with people, like because they're famous, but I don't know what they do. Yeah. So because I have my teachers and I've learned from the best. So in terms of teacher, that's all I can say in terms of the being authentic and not pushing people away.
What advice would you give to lay people? We spent a little time talking about maybe some monastic advice and those considering to ordain, but I guess in general, some just general advice to lay people in study and practice, and maybe just life in general too.
For lay people, it's a lot wider in terms of what you can get from monks in terms of looking for a teacher. It's very wide, and because they have, you're not looking to follow the monastic rules, you're looking to get the knowledge. In terms of advice I can give for lay people in terms of the practice, in terms of their learning, in terms of what they're doing, the main thing is to try to keep a wholesome mind, try to pay attention to the mind and understand when it's wholesome, when it's unwholesome. Practice loving kindness. It's very important. And to actually try to practice loving kindness in the Pa'ak level. One of the problems with Pa'ak is you don't try anything until you get into the order. It's like a staircase. It's presented like a staircase, actually. And but you can like loving kindness is one of the last things they teach in the samatha world. And so most people never even learn about loving kindness, but you can practice loving kindness. And one of the qualities or benefits is that it's easy to do. It's easy to concentrate the mind. It's something very wonderful. And I hope that people can practice loving kindness. If all you have is 5 minutes, okay, yeah, do it every day, 5 minutes. It's good. But you can also try to develop it and also to have loving kindness, sort of a mindfulness on that, and also developing these beautiful mental factors to have awareness of that, and to see when you have these mental qualities, these mental ingredients that are beautiful, when they're not beautiful, because then you'll be in the wholesome, not be in the wholesome. And so you'll understand better. And also, just by paying attention to those qualities of what is beautiful and what is not beautiful, you'll know on a practical level that the Abhidhamma is correct. And then this will help you understand that the teachings are definitely correct, and that we should apply them. And to apply the teachings, and just to apply something to try to take a very simple part of the Buddhist teachings that you're able to do, and try to incorporate that in your life. Because the teachings are very wide, and you get really confused, and you can just keep reading new and new suttas, and they do end, but it's almost like they never end. Yeah, so you can just keep reading a new sutta every day, and pretty much never get the end. And by the time you go to the end, you forgot the ones you read in the 3 years ago, because 3-year cycle or something like that. So yeah, so if you can take like a small part of the teaching that you're able to do, it's simple, and it helps you have a wholesome mind, it helps you have a beautiful mind, it helps you be more loving kindness, have more loving kindness. But being beautiful and wholesome, this is what is very important. Of course, if you're doing that, then you're following the precepts, the 5 precepts. This is very important to follow the 5 precepts as like a minimum. I say have a wholesome mind, try to have a beautiful mind, but you also want to definitely focus on the 5 precepts. And this is for those who don't know, it's not to kill, not to steal, not to engage in sexual misconduct, not to tell lies, any type of lie, and to completely stay away from any type of intoxicating substance. So this is just basic common sense stuff. And so you have the base of the sila, and then you have the element of practice, keeping the mind beautiful, loving kindness, keeping the mind, if the mind is beautiful, you have the mind in the wholesome states, having a wholesome mind. Then your actions will be wholesome, and your speech will be wholesome, and your mind will be wholesome. And so that's a very simple baby Dhamma message, and that's what I try to push. Yeah. So I hope that this can help.
Well, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante. Yes, and will be beautiful grounds for growing wisdom as well, which will overcome everything, right? And take us to the final goal someday if we stay on the true path. So thank you so much for joining, and thanks, Ani, for suggesting this and sharing. And I'll just throw it back to Ani to say anything she wants to do before we leave here.
I appreciate your time, your patience, your availability to do this at a late time in the evening. You're monastic. That's why your schedule is very busy. Sometimes it is the thought that monastic don't just go and sit and do nothing, but they're actually super busy. And I know you're very busy. So I appreciate your time, your patience, your availability, and your kindness in sharing more than baby Dhamma. So, and thank you so much again. Sadhu.
Okay, yes. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
All right, and with that,
okay.
sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.